Hey everybody, it's Mark Bouchard with Police Mentors. So the reason I have this channel is because I want to help police officers or people that want to become police officers as well, and especially around mental health. And it's because I've experienced those challenges myself. I have 18 years in law enforcement with two different agencies. I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress, and I just look at it like I'm healing out loud. And so in today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit about a recent experience I had and just try and show what I'm doing to get better. And the point of it is to normalize it so that anyone else experiencing these things who might be doing it now or who might experience them in the future has a point of reference that can help them. So this is going to be episode 5 of the Police Mentors podcast, and I'll just jump right into the story. So I'm recording this here in September of 2025, and this happened late this summer. I went to like a local fair, so it was in Vancouver, and at this big fair, it's actually quite a large thing. It's called the P&E, and they have a dog show. So I went to the dog show. I took my wife and my 2 kids, who are 3 and 6, and my father, who's almost 80. And we sat down, and there's all these little dogs running around, going crazy, having fun. Everyone's having a good time. And I couldn't stop crying. And I didn't know why. So I sat there, and when I say I couldn't stop crying, I mean like I literally couldn't stop. I just kept crying. And I've been seeing a psychologist who is trying to help me to work through some of the different things I experience. And one of the things she's asked me to do is in moments like that to just try to think of why I'm feeling this way. And for me, it brought back a call that I attended, which was an animal cruelty file that we submitted some charges on. And it had to do with a dog that had been killed in a mean way, and to do with another dog that we rescued that was being mistreated, and that thankfully was recovered really well, was able to get some food, etc., and started doing a lot better. But at this show, a lot of the dogs were very small, and the dog that died that day was also a very small dog. So in that moment, as I'm at this dog show with my kids and my family, and as I have that realization and I think of that call, I just broke down crying uncontrollably. So I went from unable to stop crying to fully out of control, just bawling my eyes out, can't talk. And the really hard thing was my family was there. So my oldest son is asking me, "Dad, why are you so sad? Dad, what's the matter? Dad, why are you crying?" And I had to just leave, like to even get control of myself. I had to just remove myself from that place for a while and just focus on my breathing and just try and regain some control of myself. And I did come back, and I was still crying. I was still impacted by this. And even after the show was over, my wife tried asking me what's going on, and I couldn't even talk. I had to just text her something like, "Take the kids," So I took some time to myself and just tried to probably just calm my nervous system, do some breathing, just sit on a bench. And I was able, obviously, over time, to get back to controlling myself. And I won't say that's the only time stuff like that happens to me. I think it feels like sometimes stuff like that happens with things around kids. And I've had some calls related to like some bad stuff with child sex assaults, which I think also can impact me, can have lasting impact. And that's also something I'm trying to work on. And I'm actually very hopeful that these will get better. And I say that because I used to have some other calls that I'd experienced that really bothered me. Going back to being police officer with 2 months experience. I took my first fatal next of kin car crash. This one, two young girls, young women, died. And I was on scene trying to deal with everything for hours of a very tragic car crash where they had died on scene. And then I had to go and do the next of kin and tell their families, well, one family in particular, that their loved one had died. And that stuck with me for like 10 years. Like if I thought about it, I'd break down crying. I lived near there. I worked in that area. So when I drive by, there would be the reminders, and it would bother me. It would be upsetting. And eventually I was able to work on it, and I got a lot better. But it took a lot of years. And for a while, I ended up off work on stress leave, just unable to function. I had a lot of nightmares, like trauma nightmares, essentially. And not just about that. There was other aspects. It came from essentially like lethal force decisions. Not that I've shot anyone, but just having situations where people have pulled or pointed imitation firearms at me. And I think even more so than the danger of the situation or feeling in danger was the pain of how badly we don't want to have to shoot someone as a police officer. And then I think our brain tries to rehearse those type of situations. It's almost like our subconscious mind is trying to prepare us for the next event, the next iteration, to keep us safe, to help us do our job. And I think it's partly that in the moment it can feel so overwhelming. So after I came back from my time off work, I just ended up being pretty honest with my friends, my coworkers, people I would call brothers, like my teammates on my team. And I heard so much of Me Too. So many people that struggled with really similar issues, who'd had similar experiences. And, you know, whether they'd been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, whether their marriage was falling apart, they had a drinking problem, and physical symptoms. Anything from thinking they were having a heart attack, to having their hair fall out, to, you know, whether it's facial tics or rashes, or, you know, you basically could call it like psychosomatic stress. But it's that the stress is internal. It's in a way in your mind, in your nervous system, in your body, and it comes out in physical ways. And I had people who'd attended horrible calls that I've worked with who said, "Oh no, it never bothered me." And then only years later did they say, "Well, actually, you know, here's how it was showing up in my body itself. I just didn't even see it in the moment. I didn't know it. I didn't recognize it until years later." So what I did is I started studying everything I could about this. And there really is good treatment and good information and things that we can do to help ourselves. And now what I'm trying to do with this podcast, with this YouTube channel, and just in general, you know, I wrote a book about it too. It's called Setting My Sights on Stigma, Thoughts from an Injured Mind. If you want to check it out, you can read some free chapters on my website. I'll put a link in the description. And you can actually download a free PDF of my book. You just plug in your email address. And you can read it for free. I never wrote this to sell it to you. I wrote it to help you. I just put it in a book format so that you would believe it's worth your time. What I did in my book is I share about 40 pages worth of my journaling. So I have all this journaling from when I was off work on stress leave. And it's me expressing how I was feeling and saying what I was thinking. And really what you're seeing in what I'm writing is the stigma that I felt. But when we talk about stigma, we actually really need to talk about self-stigma, because that's what's showing up. It's that we're so hard on ourselves. How can I be so weak? What's wrong with me? Everybody else went to the same calls. I don't know why it's impacting me. Meanwhile, we don't know that so many other police officers, so many of our peers, our coworkers are also struggling after, you know, some of the same calls, some of the same events. And we're just not seeing it. There's been times when I hit the point in my life of what would be described as like passive suicidal ideation. I didn't know what that was in the moment, but here's what that looked like. That looked like envisioning creating my own death. And it's hard to talk about, but it's true. That's where I got to, where you're just so overwhelmed in pain that this is my own understanding of my own experience and my own putting it into layman's terms, is that I think your subconscious mind is so desperately trying to seek an end to the pain that it starts to see that as some sort of soothing, then the pain will finally end. Now, I never had a plan, and thankfully, I'm here. But I think it's something that's important to prepare people for, to talk about, because I think there's connections between trauma and suicide. And I think that ties me back into the things, there's some parts we can control and some parts we can't. If you're going to be a frontline police officer, you're probably going to be exposed to trauma and danger and sadness and suffering and death. Those are part of what police officers get called to. And I've experienced my share of it. And often we get into it thinking it's all about the danger. It's all about that you're going to get shot or stabbed, or that the bad guys are going to get you. And some of that stuff is real. It's not made up. It is real. But there's that other side of the job, the emotional pain side of the job, the trauma, that's just as real. And there are a lot more that we can do to help with that. So that's why I have chapters on trauma, to really understand it, where I share passages from my journaling of what it was like to experience those things in the moment. And I talk a lot about things like alcohol. Like, I went from kind of being a not really much of a drinker at one point to drinking a lot, as that was like how I was coping. And it was really bad for me. It was really unhealthy for me. And then I managed to stop drinking. But that was really hard. Like, that came down to, like, I had to shrink my goal right down to 1 hour. Go an hour without drinking, on a Tuesday in the middle of the day or in the morning. That was where I was at in my life. So, that's one thing we can control. And I think now I'll still have a drink very infrequently. I'll have a social drink if my wife asks me to have a drink, or if I'm celebrating, I'll have a beer with the guys at hockey or something, and that's no big deal for me now. I have control of it. But I think I'm a lot healthier, and I think my mental health is a lot better because I don't drink, or because I drink so little. And the other thing that we can control is our sleep. So sleep is when we process some of the traumatic memories, reprocess things. Again, it's so crucial for our health. And police work naturally often disrupts your sleep. You have shift patterns, you have call-outs, you have overtime, you have on-call, and many of us have families and other challenges too. But we need to find a way to prioritize our sleep, to make it important, and to understand what helps our sleep and what doesn't. So even this, I'm recording this on a Friday night. I'm going to go for sauna after. I'm going to go for sauna, and that's going to help me sleep tonight. That warming up of my body then makes it cool itself down, and I'll have more of a deep sleep, a restorative sleep. So it's finding, what things you can do. For some people, it's medication, it's sleeping pills, it's that kind of stuff. And there's a time and a place for things to help you, but long term, that's not a great strategy. You want to try and see what kind of natural things you can do that will help you to work your way through some of these things. Which brings me back to the story that started this whole thing of me. I used to describe these as having panic attacks. I actually, since this event, I've been back to see my psychologist, and I actually asked, like, is that PTSD? Is that what that is? Like, describing what happened. And she said yes. And it is stuff we can work on. So there are, like, scientifically evidence-based, proven treatments of things like EMDR, and I'm currently doing an emotion-focused therapy. And again, there's all kinds of other CBTs and CPTs, all these things. And many of them have really good evidence supporting them, but they don't work if we don't do them. And that's where I was 10 years ago, where I went to see a psychologist one time and never went back. Or I went to see a psychologist who recommended a treatment, and I said, you can't make me try your voodoo BS. Well, that's not going to help me if I won't do it. So that's really a part of what I'm doing with this channel, is just trying to normalize what I experience for other people. Because even if you haven't experienced yet, maybe you want to be a cop and you're just trying to understand it so that you can be a little bit more ready and you can develop those good habits, staying fit, eating healthy, focus on your sleep, being careful you put in your body between alcohol, caffeine, all those kind of things, so that you don't get to the place where you're broken. I don't think that we need to all end up broken through these careers and divorced and not talking to our kids and all the problems that have historically, hit some police families. So I like to think of this as just healing out loud. I'm not sharing this. I don't want sympathy. I'm not looking for someone to say, I'm sorry you experienced that or anything like that. I just want to make it okay that if someone else goes through it, that they know they can get through it and that they're not condemned to suffer forever, that there's hope. And although I still experience some things from this, I have so many less symptoms than I have at some times in my life. When I think of things like nightmares, there were times when the nightmares were like multiple times a night. And now it's way less. That's great. I used to dread going to sleep. I don't anymore. And I'll say I had one this week. I was at the range for a couple weeks doing some training, and then, your brain starts creating nightmares around shootings. And again, it's not even that I have shot someone, but it's that I've been in some pretty high stress moments. And your brain basically replays some of those. And those moments when I felt like I needed to shoot people were really emotionally painful for me because I really didn't want to. And I think that's also something that can get lost in society, that some people don't, they think of outcome-based decision-making. So they just hear, police officer shot someone. Oh, it turns out that was a teenager, or that the firearm wasn't real. See, the cop never should have shot them, without understanding the reality of how badly the officer didn't want to and the impacts on the officers. You can read a book like Shots Fired by Chuck Ryland, where they follow several officers after their shootings, and some of them end up like right up to the point of suicidal. A lot of their lives fall apart. They're rocked by all kinds of PTSD symptoms, nightmares. That's back to the nightmares. I didn't understand that it's that your brain is trying to help you prepare. And that in those nightmares, something's going wrong. You can't get the gun out of the holster. The gun won't work. There's all these different things like your brain is trying to prepare you for. And I think for me, understanding them, journaling about them, writing about them has helped to make them not only more tolerable, but less painful. I just want to share this primarily as a message of hope, and I know that other people experience symptoms of trauma, PTSD, whatever you want to call it. I actually prefer to call it a psychological injury because that's now how I see my experience. I have physical injuries from the job. I have osteoarthritis. I have back injuries, knee injuries. I have lots of injuries, not to mention the head injuries. And some of them are related to the job. And it's the same as my psychological injuries. Some of them are absolutely related to my job. But I go to physio pretty regularly. I go to massage therapy. I'm proactive about maintaining my physical health, just like I do things to be proactive about my mental health. And that includes going to see a psychologist. I would go more if my psychologist had more availability, because I want to be healthy. At the end of the day, I want to be healthy for my family. And that's where it shows up. We don't we're not often willing to talk about that side, but sometimes it shows up in anger, in yelling at your kids. And sometimes it's not really about that thing that's happening in the moment. It's that your cup's overflowing and you didn't sleep last night, and you're impacted by the other things in your world. And then, you're yelling at your kids or your spouse or whatever. Your home life is impacted. There's a saying that's something like, if you don't heal what hurt you, you'll bleed all over those who didn't cut you. And I think there's a part of that that's been happening to our families. There's a great book called Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement by Dr. Kevin Gilmartin. I have a video actually a couple videos of summaries if you want to check them out on my YouTube channel. I'd highly recommend reading that book. And although it's not so much focused on the trauma side, it does talk about the impacts this job can have on us, how we change, and also on our families. But I think the best thing to know is it doesn't have to. You can be a great cop and still be a great parent. You can be a great cop and still be a great spouse. And that work can't always win. Like at some point we have to put ourselves and our family and our health first so that we can continue to show up and be a good cop and serve our community and keep people safe and do all the things we need to do. So, yeah, this video, this episode, it's going to be a short one, but really it's just meant to normalize what we go through, to make it okay. It's okay if you're not okay, but if you're not, then get busy helping yourself. There's no one coming to save you. It's up to you to take care of yourself. Don't wait until things get so bad that it feels unbearable. Be proactive. Try and do things regularly. Develop habits to stay healthy. Even for me, like I said, I'm about to go in the sauna right after this. Take care of myself and then try and get to bed at a decent hour and get a good sleep and then get up and have a workout in the morning. So I would encourage you to just do a little self-reflection. How does this show up in your life? How are you doing now? What are the things that you do that helps you to stay healthy? And what else could you try? Maybe what's one more thing that you could try that you haven't done that might help you to stay healthy? All right, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what else you'd like to hear about. Okay, thanks for listening.